صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from head to toe. Definitely, it's something that every Muslim would wish to do in the most perfect way. Why? Because this is the purpose of our life. And that is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. The most perfect way of worship is the way of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. There is no accepted act of worship unless we do that sincerely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to the way of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is what we need to be consistently doing in all of our affairs, in every different and specific and general action that we do, with our tongues, with our hearts, with the different parts of our bodies. And that's what we need to discuss and learn and act accordingly. We're still talking about the tongue, this amazing muscle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for us to be either a mean for the success of the person in this life and in the hereafter, or the opposite of that, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbid, and that is to lead the person to the hellfire, wal-'iyadhu billah. According to what? According to what we say with our own tongues. People interact with one another, and as a result of this interaction, either a person will be able to be pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or otherwise. And that's why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضَكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً أَتَصْبِرُونَ, that means we made you towards one another fitna. We are fitna, we are test to one another. We are test to one another with regards to how do we treat one another, how do we act with one another, how do we speak to one another, and every word that comes out of our mouth, we will be even rewarded for it, either rewarded for it, or a person will be punished as a result of that. One of the things that we need to avoid when it comes to using our tongues is being argumentative. That causes enmity and causes hatred towards people from one another, and that is al-jidal, or to be argumentative in every major and small issue. Of course, arguing or debating with someone either can be benefiting or harmful. If it's benefiting, definitely it's a good thing. It's a rewardable thing. And the Quran teaches us that in some cases where the messengers would debate and argue with the truth, facing the disbelievers, like Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he debated with the king, whether it's Namrud or the name was not mentioned in the Quran. أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِي حَاجَّ إِبْرَاهِيمَ فِي رَبِّهِ أَنْ أَتَاهُ اللَّهُ الْمُلْكِ إذ قال إبراهيم ربي الذي يحيي ويميت قال أنا أحيي وأميت قال إبراهيم فإن الله يأتي بالشمس من المشرق فأتي بها من المغرب فبهت الذي كفر والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. Which means, have you seen the one that argued with Ibrahim alayhi salam, the king that argued with Ibrahim alayhi salam? When Ibrahim alayhi salam, he said to him that Allah, the Most High, is the one that gives life and causes death. So the king said, I give life and I give death. So Ibrahim alayhi salam took him to another point, since he is basically arrogantly and ignorantly arguing in such a way, as if he is saying that I can leave someone to live, this is a way of keeping him alive, and I would not kill him, this is a way to protect his life. This is not what Ibrahim alayhi salam meant. But without wasting his time debating with this king, this arrogant king, Ibrahim alayhi salam showed him another argument that he can never ever oppose it whatsoever. He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings the sun from the east, you bring it from the west. So this man was astonished, he could not continue with the argument. So the point is, this is a valid argument, this is a rewardable one, if a person is defending the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what is being condemned is when arguments does not lead to anything that is good. When arguments is for the sake of a personal victory, or someone to looking for fame, or to defeat the other person, and not the goal is to seek the truth. And this is what is condemned in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala condemned the disbelievers those who would argue with the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يُجَادِلُونَ فِي آيَاتِ اللَّهِ بِغَيْرِ سُلْطَانٍ أَتَاهُمْ إِن فِي صُدُورِهِمْ إِلَّا كِبْرٌ مَا هُمْ بِبَالِغِينَ, which means those who argue with regards to the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason for that is there is nothing in the hearts except kibr, arrogance. And that's basically the root reason for why people would argue in an ignorant way. Because of the kibr, because of the arrogance. A person doesn't want to be defeated, doesn't want to see the truth. Even if the truth is with the other side, he doesn't want to see the truth. His goal is to defeat the others, is to be superior over the others. The believers, because their hearts are attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their goal is to show the truth and to receive the truth and to apply the truth. Their whole life is about the truth. So the disbelievers, they argue with the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, they don't argue with the physical signs, the sun and the air and so on. They argue with the religious signs, the signs that are mentioned in the Qur'an and in the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Then, when it comes to the things that is not permissible for us to continue with arguments, remember hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which is a very serious hadith that we need to reflect upon, especially in these days that we live in. The Prophet ﷺ said in the authentic hadith, مَا ضَلَّ قَوْمٌ بَعْدَ هُدًى كَانُوا عَلَيْهِ إِلَّا أُوتُوا الْجَدَلِ, which means there is no group of people that would deviate after guidance unless they will be given argumentative abilities and to argue and to argue and to argue. They will be given the status. They're always arguing. This is a very serious one. So that means if people were guided on the truth and then they take the path of deviation, مَا ضَلَّ قَوْمٌ بَعْدَ هُدًى كَانُوا عَلَيْهِ, they were on guidance, but they were deviated afterwards. They committed sins. They changed the guidance that they were in. What happens to them? They will be given al-jadal. They will be given arguing. This will be their nature. It becomes their habit. They will be consistently doing that. That's why when we see among the Muslim Ummah, when people are leaving behind actions and they're busy with arguing with one another, each group, each individual wants to prove that he is right. It doesn't matter who is on the truth. People arguing and arguing and arguing. And where's actions? Where is establishing what is right? Establishing the salah, and paying the zakah, and helping the needy, and being kind to one another, and teaching what is right, and enjoining good and forbidding evil, and calling into Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so on. The different acts. We need to be busy with doing actions, and not just to sit and argue with one another. Life is so precious, and it's very limited. And unless a person would use the time that we have on the face of earth with the most important deeds in our lives, then this will be a source of regret in the Day of Judgment. People would regret the time that they spend arguing with one another. That's why the early generations of Islam, you would find this even in the books of Aqidah, in the books of belief. They would mention in it that part of the Aqidah of the people of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, part of the belief of the people of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Tark al-Khusumat, which means to stay away from argumentative situations with the people of bid'ah, with the people of innovations, with the people of desire. They do not mean by leaving arguing with them, they do not mean by that to stop showing the truth and to debate with them. This is not what is meant. But when it reaches a level where there is no benefit as a result of the arguments or the debates, they leave that, right? And they're busy with teaching the people what is right and to warn them from what is evil. So al-jidal is definitely something that we need to be careful when it comes to using our tongues, and the sincerity and the truthfulness present in the heart will make the person always looking for the truth. This is something that the early generations of Islam, their concern whenever they would debate with someone is for them to see the truth. And the truth was more beloved to them than for them to be victorious, to the extent of which that they would wish if the truth was with the other side, with the other person, that this is something that would not make them upset whatsoever, because their goal is the truth and to hold fast to the truth. And it's not about winning or a personal gain or fame or whatever there is. And this is how the beauty of the religion of Islam, when a person is perfectly applying the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is another disease, and comes with arguments once we argue, and once we continue to argue, more evil things will come as a result of that. A person can backbite, slandering. A person might fall into saying evil words and foul language, for example, and being unfair and being unjust, which is all the fruits of arguments, not for the sake of finding the truth, but for the sake of winning and gaining and so on. Also, when it comes to argument or with arguments, that is an evil thing, and not to follow the truth or to find the truth, comes with that a person might fall into lying or arguments when it comes to matters of the Qur'an. There's an authentic hadith reported by Imam Ahmad rahimahullah that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-jidalu fil Qur'ani kufr," which means arguing in matters of the Qur'an is an act of disbelief. What does that mean? We need to learn the Qur'an, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to benefit from the Qur'an. Our job as Muslims when it comes to the Qur'an is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. We believe that the Qur'an is the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, we read the Qur'an, we ponder over the Qur'an, and we act accordingly. But when people would leave actions and leave the concern that they want to act according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them, and instead of that they would argue. And they would argue in such a way, and sometimes in an evil way, that they would use the Qur'an to relax the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Umar radiallahu anhu, he said in a very beautiful statement that one of the things that destroys the religion of Islam, one of which is jidalul munafiq bil kitab, the arguments of the munafiq, of the hypocrite, with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A hypocrite, someone that has disbelief in his heart, and he speaks, he looks like a Muslim, he acts like a Muslim, but he wants to destroy the religion of Islam. So what this hypocrite would do, he would use the verses of the Qur'an, and he would argue with the verses of the Qur'an to divert people from the truth, because the Qur'an has general terms. That's why the Qur'an and the Sunnah, they go hand in hand. They never separated in the life of a Muslim, because the Sunnah explains the Qur'an. The actions of the Prophet ﷺ explains the Qur'an, and how the early generations of Islam, how the companions radiallahu anhum understood the Qur'an and applied the Qur'an. This is something that is mandatory for us to understand the Qur'an this way. So we have to be warned from those who would argue with verses of the Qur'an, to divert the people from actions, to make people do less actions and just be busy with arguments and committing sins and all of that, using the Qur'an, using the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why when this happens, this is a mean of fitan and tribulations, when a person might fall and slip into the sins and deviation. And to protect ourselves is to stay away from these forms of arguments and arrogance and ignorance, and instead to be busy with learning the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a humble way from the people of knowledge, and to stay away from being argumentative and debating and all these things, and we leave that to the people of knowledge, and in a healthy way, in a benefiting way, and to protect our tongues from what brings or subject ourselves to the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our tongues and to protect our bodies from disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين. قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين لا شريك له وبذلك